Good afternoon. I'm hiking a little side trail that seems to run along the side of Bear Mountain in Red Rock Country. And I'm going to break here to talk some anime.
Ghost in the Shell, standalone complex, second.
Masamune Shiro's Ghost in the Shell cyberpunk manga spawned several futuristic anime, including 2 theatrical movies and 2 seasons of a standalone complex TV series. The second season of that TV series, also known as the second gig, followed a year after the first and came out about the same time as the second Ghost in the Shell movie, Innocence, was released. And it's that second TV season that I want to talk about today. It was made by the same creative team as the first season and features pretty much the same characters, the secret and elite Japanese security team of Section 9. If you're not familiar with their field leader, Major Kusanagi, Agents Bato and Togusa, Section Head Aramaki and their colleagues, check out one of my earlier discussions. A single plot runs through all 26 episodes of the second season. Following World Wars III and IV, Japan needed to do a lot of rebuilding, and Southeast Asia had a lot of displaced refugees. Japan welcomed these Asian refugees to work on reconstruction as cheap labor. But when that work was done, unemployment jumped, and the immigrant ghettos became an impoverished drag on the Japanese economy. Following events of the first standalone complex series, Japan has a new government, which promises to reverse Japan's liberal refugee policy. The new Prime Minister, Kayabuki, is a woman, and a surprisingly young and attractive one at that. Maggie Thatcher and Eva Perón, all wrapped up in one package. She's reactivated Section 9 to help deal with a growing refugee crisis that her government's anticipated new policies are triggering, starting with some anti-refugee terrorists who take over the Chinese embassy to protest Chinese refugee policy. Things start with these anti-refugee terrorists, the self-styled Individualist 11, and their copycats, which Section 9 thinks is actually some sort of cyberbrain virus rather than a real political movement. One of them, a charismatic fellow named Kuze with a military-grade cyborg body from the last war, attempts to assassinate the Prime Minister herself. Luckily, Section 9 is helping out with the bodyguard detail. Sometime later, a dozen of these so-called individualists assemble on a skyscraper rooftop for an unusual act of public protest. The one who apparently didn't get the memo on color coordination is that Kuze fellow again. He's also not with the program in other ways. In fact, he eventually turns about and becomes the leader of the pro-refugee movement, opposing Japan's new refugee policies by attempting to win independence for their enclave, and he rises to become a major character in the story. Other characters will describe him as charismatic and cool, but I'm not sure the anime manages to show exactly why that's true. It must be something in his cyberbrain. On the other side of the political spectrum is Goda, the Machiavellian head of Japan's Cabinet Intelligence Service. He and the Cabinet Secretary have their own political agenda, more radical than the Prime Minister's, and escalating tension between the refugees and the government suits that plan. To that end, he'll try to manipulate Kuze and his followers and the refugees. He'll also do his best to get Section 9 out of the way of his plans, doing everything he can to distract them, to keep them too busy reacting to events to get out in front of them. This makes for an interesting, if complicated, story, with Goda and Kuze working towards opposite ends and trying to manipulate each other, with Section 9 caught in the middle. There are a number of episodes that feature some well-done action, traditional sort, with chases and explosions and gunfights of the usual sort. These also serve to further the protagonist's manipulation, and there are also some episodes about hacking in cyberspace, done with a different and more expansive visual technique than in the first series. These also serve the more subtle storyline. Both men realize that truth isn't as important as perception, especially Goda, who uses misinformation and misdirection on every level, from old-fashioned planting of physical evidence to hacking databases and spreading cyberviruses. Despite the occasional outbreak of real-world violence, this storyline is more about the manipulation of intelligence and people, a fight that can't be won with just a big gun and some cyborg warriors.
Mr. Aramaki, I appreciate what you and Section 9 have done.
Hey!
So you use my team as a decoy.
You son of a bitch! Who the hell do you think we are?
Try to rein in your ego and be thankful that you got to play the role of decoy under my direction.
While the second gig has a single main storyline, there are still several side story episodes. Most of these are tied in as examples of Goda's distractions, such as when he arranges for the German government to request Bato and Kusanagi come to Berlin to help them capture an international terrorist. The Major gets a mysterious cyber visit, part of her own past that will relate to the present story. There are also a few interesting episodes that flesh out the less heralded members of Section 9. Saito gets to tell a story of his first encounter with Major Kusanagi, told in such a way that when he's finished we can't be sure if it was really true. There's an interesting investigation into a possible terrorist who's an improbable cross between Walter Mitty and Travis Bickle. The difference between a side story and mere filler depends on whether you find them entertaining, and almost all the episodes here that aren't key to the central story still worked very well for me. The second gig is from the same creative staff as the first. It's again directed by Kenji Kamiyama, who also served as head writer, and he has the same animation team from Production IG. They've used computer animation for the fixed sets, the tachikoma and other mechas, plus boats, cars, and other aircraft in the story. That's all smoothly integrated with the traditional character art to give a very film-like character placement and movement. The music is provided by Yoko Kanno, including a new opening piece. The style is noticeably different from the first series, going much more towards a percussive, jazzy beat. I wasn't as enthusiastic about it as I was for the first series' soundtrack. Overall, I like the second series a bit more than the first series, and I give it 4.5 stars. Unlike so much anime, these feature adult characters. The series also weaves a sophisticated story together with some action sequences, character development, and a number of engaging side stories that all mesh rather well together. Manga Entertainment's English dub is again excellent, with the same voice cast returning from the first season. It has more subtlety than most English dubs. Most notably, during the midpoint, Major Kusanagi dives into cyberspace and has a bad hacking experience that shakes her confidence and leaves her a bit distracted. Mary McGlynn does a good job reflecting that change in Kusanagi's English voice. And each of the original DVD releases in the US features director Kamiyama and a different voice cast member discussing their characters and shows.
Individual.
After the TV series ended, each season was edited into a 2.5-hour compilation movie. The second one became The Individual 11. This stripped the introduction and character spotlight stories from the series and concentrated strictly on the series' main plot by reusing animation from the series. Since so much of the second season was part of that single plotline, a number of scenes were recut or moved into different parts of the story, or removed altogether, changing some plot points along the way, much more so than with the first season's Laughing Man compilation. Both Japanese and English dialogue was redubbed to provide explanation for redacted scenes. I found the compilation a mixed effort that struggled to keep all the intricacies of the original plot, and loses a number of excellent side stories in the process. The complete series used its expanded time very well, and even the unrelated side stories are worth the time to watch, so I recommend watching the whole 26 episodes rather than the Cliff's Note version. By the way, the second season of Standalone Complex also had a lot of references to other Ghost in the Shell and anime material. The very first episode has Major Kusanagi using her optical camouflage to disappear while jumping from a skyscraper rooftop, exactly mimicking the opening of the first Ghost in the Shell movie. The final scene in the last episode's denouement, complete with setting and dialogue, is lifted directly from the start of Shiro's original Ghost in the Shell manga.
Major, I have a report stating that the supplementary budget passed.
Right. I'm calling off our round-the-clock cherry blossom op. We're back on the jobs.
Episode 9 puts Togusa into a confrontation with a suicide bomber that recalls Fusei's dilemma in Jinro. And in Episode 3, when Section 9 wants to create a fake burglary, they whimsically invent a cat burglar cleverly named Cash Eye, who leaves a calling card reminiscent of the old Cat's Eye anime series. The plot itself echoes the second Patlabor movie, with a government official working both sides of a political dispute by secretly supporting a radical who he hopes will shake up Japan's government. Indeed, the credits list Patlabor director Oshii as the story creator. Thanks for watching.